Okay, so I'm in the book of Daniel, right? And I've talked about this before in one of my videos, but I just wanted, as I was reading, I just want to take y'all a little bit deeper. So if y'all got y'all Bibles, I appreciate it if y'all read with me. But we in Daniel chapter 10, verse 8. So it says, "So I was left alone and saw this great vision, and no strength was left in me. My radiant appearance was fearfully changed, and I retained no strength." A vision comes upon Daniel. I believe this is a vision of possibly Jesus, if I'm not mistaken. And it's so overwhelming to him that he loses his strength. And as we know, Daniel goes on a Daniel fast, right? He eats nothing but vegetables and drinks water. And because of that, his appearance he was like, it says he has a radiant appearance. I'm assuming his skin was probably glowing. He looked a lot healthier versus someone who just eating meat all the time, right? And then he says, "Then I heard the sound of his words. And as I heard the sound of his words, I fell on my face in deep sleep with my face to the ground." So that's verse 9. So he falls on the ground. His face is completely flat on the floor, right? And then afterward, peep just the power of words. So I'm going to take y'all a little bit deeper. So boom. And it says, "And behold, a hand touched me and sent me trembling on my hands and knees." So Daniel was originally on his face, completely flat on the floor in a deep sleep. I believe this is Jesus once again. So he touched him. He's on his hands and his knees now. He's not standing on his feet. He's on his hands and his knees. And in verse 11, it says, "And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly loved, understand the words that I speak to you and stand upright, for now I have been sent to you." And after that, the next verse after that, Daniel is able to stand up now. Mind you, this vision is so overwhelming that it's taken all of his strength. He can't even stand up on his own. Hence why Jesus had to touch him, and he could only be on his hands and his knees. And he didn't get up until he said, "Stand upright." All right, so boom, we're going. And it says, afterwards it says, "And when he had spoken his word to me, I stood up trembling." So it's so overwhelming. Once again, he's in fear, right? Trembling. He's scared because it's just so overwhelming. Then he said to me, "Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and humble yourself before God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words." Once again, he tells him not to fear. So at first, he was on the floor. Then he touched him. Now he's on his hands and knees. Then he speaks to him and tells him to stand upright. He couldn't do it before. But the Lord told him, "Stand upright." Boom, he stands up. Then he stands up, but he's still trembling. The fear ain't go away. Jesus just told him to stand up, but he didn't tell the fear to go away, so it still remained. We're going to skip to verse 15. So it says, "When he had spoken to me according to these words, I turned my face toward the ground and was mute." Another thing I want to point out before I keep going is that Daniel no longer talks about having fear after he tells him to fear not. So then once again, as I just read, he says, "When he has spoken to me according to these words, I turned my face toward the ground and was mute." So this whole time, Daniel has been mute. He has not spoken not once. He's just been listening. So then boom. And it says, verse 16 says, "And behold, one in the likeness of the children of men touched my lips. Then I opened my mouth and spoke. And I said to him who stood before me, O my Lord, by reason of the vision, pains have come upon me, and I retain no strength." Every issue that Daniel has been dealing with due to this vision, the Lord has either spoken to it or he's given him the strength to overcome it. At first, he couldn't stand up. He told him to stand up. When he stood up, he was afraid. He was trembling. He was shaking. He told him, "Fear not." He stopped shaking. He stopped being afraid. But he could not speak. The vision was so overwhelming, he still could not speak properly. He couldn't even open his mouth. A child touches his mouth, and he's able to speak now. Verse 17 says, "How can my Lord's servant talk with my Lord? For now no strength remains in me, and no breath is left in me." So peep, even though he can talk now, he still feels weary. He still feels weak. So he's able to stand up. The fear is gone, and he can speak. But it's still something missing. He's still not fully restored. So then after that, verse 18 says, "And again, one having the appearance of a man touched me and strengthened me." And in verse 19, he says, "O man greatly loved, fear not, peace be with you, be strong and of good courage." So every situation that Daniel was dealing with, Jesus spoke directly to it. And after that, he no longer struggled with it. So I'm going to take y'all through it. So at first he was on his face. Then Jesus touched him. He was on his hands and his knees, shaking, trembling, mute. He's just listening. He can't speak nothing. Jesus tells him, stand up. He's able to stand up, but he's still afraid. He tells the fear to go away. The fear goes away. Then he can't speak still. He's still unable to speak. Children of man touches his mouth. He's able to speak now. And then he, tells him, like, I can't fully, listen to what you're saying without all this pain, all this weariness, all my strength is gone. So then he speaks to him again over everything he just went over, except he adds something new at the end. Be strong and of good courage. And with the fear, he says, fear not, peace be with you. Peace replacing that fear. And he no longer struggles. It says afterwards, and it says, and as he spoke to me, I was strengthened and said, let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me. And after that, he was able to continue and listen to the conversation without any hindrances.